A guy overheard me talking about white well-being at the pub on Saturday night. He walked up to me and said, "I like what you're saying," but left so fast, I didn't even catch his name. Well, thank you for sharing that testimonial, brother. That is fantastic. That is great news. I have had that myself. I've been in conversations, and this is an unfortunate reality when you're talking with so many vagues out there, trying to bring them over to white well-being. And I'll be talking, I won't necessarily be lowering my volume of speech. That is so telling too, that when we are heretics to anti-whiteism, when we're not anti-white enough and we're out in public, if the anti-white narrative were true, if the West was controlled by white people for the benefit of white people, we would be able to say as loudly as possible in a restaurant, any public venue, that we were serving white well-being. It would just be taken for granted. And anybody who would object, they would be the ones who would be ostracized from society, hauled before tribunals. That's not what happens. No, we so often, especially when I worked on the Hill, how pathetic was it that working in the nerve center for the conservative movement, and we would go out, lunch somewhere, what have you, and we having a normal conversation, and then as soon as we wanted to talk about something conservative, suddenly we were whispering and eyes darting side to side. That tells you everything you need to know about reality. This is the evidence that the anti-whites know without a doubt that they are in charge, because they know that we can't speak up. They know that we are victimized when we speak or act heretically, when we're not anti-white enough. So when they tell you, like I saw some wonderful person, thank you very much, sent me a news clip where somebody had put up a sign over a bridge or a sheet, and it said it's okay to be white. And this anti-white bastard stopped his car. Perhaps he drove up, but got out of his car and tore the sign down. And he said, well, it's terrible because if you're a white person, you are in a position of privilege. And this gives the impression that white people are not in a position of privilege. Well, first of all, jackass, maybe I should pull that up. If somebody has that clip, I guess I can't play it, but because they would censor my channel into oblivion. But first of all, you have these white people out there, and I don't know if this guy was absolutely white. I only had a second to see it, but you have these white people who are privileged, and they're all anti-white. Every last one of them. Because if any of these privileged white people who work in the anti-white regime, if any of them say anything white positive, they are outed and fired and thrown out of the regime. They are not able to work again. So none of them are going to give that up. So I don't doubt that this guy probably got out of his $100,000 car to go tear down that sign saying that, well, white people are privileged. He had everything handed to him on a silver platter so that he could be anti-white. Never mind the fact that there are scores and scores and scores of millions within a couple hundred miles of where this jackass anti-white lives, that are hand to mouth, that didn't have a silver spoon stuck in their face when they were born, that aren't part of the anti-white regime. What an idiot. Cannot see beyond the end of his nose. Talking about how privileged whites are. You see this a lot with anti-white, white, wealthy people, is they try to justify their wealth by attacking our people. They try to say it's legitimate for me to be wealthy because I do everything I can to harm Western kind. And that's what this guy immediately reminded me of. But on top of that, it's worse. On top of that, it's much worse because he knows very well that he could go to a restaurant and say at the top of his lungs to the people sitting there with him that he is anti-white, that X, Y, and Z needs to happen across Western civilization that will harm Western kind, that will harm Western civilization. that we need white erasure. He knows he can say that and not a damn thing will happen to him. And he also knows that if somebody goes into that restaurant and speaks up and says that they are concerned about our people, that they don't like our children not being given a choice of mates, that it's always a non-white mate is going to be fun, is going to be fit, is going to be superior, and the white mate is always going to be ugly and awkward and broken. There's no choice there to be made when you tell children that. If I were in that restaurant and saying that, this anti-white slug knows that there would be diners in there who would condemn me for it, anti-whites. Perhaps even the restaurant owner would ask me to leave. He knows, that anti-white slug, that if he could follow me out and follow me to my employer, that he could go to my employer and complain, potentially get me fired. So these anti-whites, they know very well what is going on in the real world. Don't let them lie for a minute to you and say otherwise. Don't let, when they say that white people control Western civilization for their own enrichment and benefit, do not allow them that lie. Don't say to yourself, well, maybe they do actually think that. They don't believe that. Good God. They can walk out into the world and see the same thing that you see. They see just as you saw and see all the time at school, at work, that when somebody says something that's heretical to anti-whiteism, they are dragged before the anti-white tribunals and that they are punished for it. They're victimized for it. That there's a social lynching. There aren't any social lynchings for people who are anti-white. So anyhow,